On Life, Death, and Beyond, we are joined by Dr. Mark Pitstick. Dr. Mark Pitstick is the director and co-founder of the SoulPhone Foundation. With over 47 years of experience in hospitals, pastoral, counseling, and mental health centers, and private practice, he brings a lifetime of wisdom and knowledge to his work, bridging the science, spirit, and the afterlife. He is the author of several powerful, profound books, including The 11 Questions, The Afterlife Evidence, and Ask the Soul Doctor. His writings explore life, death, and what lies beyond, offering comfort and insight to those seeking deeper understanding. Mark also created the acclaimed documentary Soulproof and 9 transformative audio programs using hypnosis, breathwork, and guided imagery, such as facilitated after-death contact. He actively supports the Amazing Group, Helping Parents Heal, where you can find many inspiring YouTube conversations featuring his work and wisdom that he's sharing. Learn more about Mark's groundbreaking work at www.soulproof.com, www.soulphone.com, and www.greaterrealityliving.com. Welcome, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure to meet you, Laura.
So I'm looking forward to this conversation. You have an extensive background. I went to your website and checked it out. And what sparked that was the soul phone and a lot of the technologies that you're working with. And it kind of resonated with me. So I want to kind of dive into that and have a conversation. So we can go, it looks like you've had a lot on your website, so we can go in a lot of different directions. So I want to kind of start off with just your background. Can you share your personal journey and what first interests you in consciousness, death, and holistic healing?
Well, first of all, there's some good evidence from multiple sources that I never totally forgot. The real place, heaven, home, wherever you want to call it. When I was 6 years old, my parents were showing me a beautiful sunset, and I told them it reminded me of God. And they only told me that 17 years later when I attended theology school, because they couldn't figure out what we were brought up Lutheran. It was always God the Father, this and that. Why I would equate a beautiful sunset with the creator and sustainer of all life. And then over the years, independently, psychics, mediums would say, boy, we don't get many of you through these parts. And I say, what do you mean? And they say, you're a rare teaching soul who usually doesn't come to a place like Earth very often. But when you do, you're all business. You come here to help bring the world together. And some people called it a blueprinter. Come into realms or worlds that are ready to awaken, to have peace on earth, widespread conscious living, and do what I can to help that come to the fore. So I can believe all that. When I was a kid, it seemed like I was always thinking of, there's something I'm supposed to do. It was like a magnificent obsession. Earthly ways seemed strange to me, and I kind of had to learn how to fit in. When I saw Robert Heinlein's book, Stranger in a Strange Land, I said, yeah, that's it. That's how I felt. And so I quickly gravitated to meditation through different ways, whatever helped quiet my brain and kind of go into a different realm. Yoga, I did yoga postures when I was 12 years old. I didn't even know what they were, but it felt good, and I felt good afterwards. And so at age 19, yeah, I started in transcendental meditation. So I've been a meditator for 50 years, same with yoga. And I started working in hospitals at age 19 as a respiratory therapist part-time while I went through pre-med and theology school. And so almost every shift, I worked night shift on weekends, I would be with one or more people as they passed. And so seeing that at a young age, especially children whose bodies were dying. I didn't say the child died, but their body died. No one really dies, as you know. Led me to search for answers to the biggest questions in life. Who are we? Why are we here? What happens after we die? And so on. So I went to theology school, and then after undergrad, and then a master's in clinical psychology, and then a doctor of chiropractic to put together body, mind, and spirit. And I practiced that way for 35 years, helping all sorts of problems that way. So I've written 8 books, 10 audio programs. My website, soulproof.com, shares all that. Everything's free. Also a documentary film. And as you mentioned, I'm very involved with the SoulPhone project.
You've definitely been busy.
Hmm.
You have a lot on your website. Very interesting. I didn't get through all of it. It's definitely a lot on there. So everybody, we can share that at the end, and then they can check it out for sure. So a lot of that kind of resonated with me, what you were talking about, because after my near-death experience, first thing that came to me for self-healing was meditation. It's like one teacher came after the other, and then I learned about yoga, and then I learned about, shamanic work and healing. And so I've just been on the path for like 10 years, healing and awakening my spiritual abilities. And this is where I'm at now, helping people also with transitioning and going into the death doula, which was this year's calling. So that's my path that I'm heading on to now as it evolves. So awesome.
Well,
Now,
kudos. By the
thank
way, what you just said, Laura, is a hallmark of more advanced souls. They tend to be healers, helpers, teachers. So kudo on that. And by the way, for your viewers, um, I put together a little survey. It's article number 117 at soulproof.com called "Are You a More Advanced Soul?" Because there are different signs, definitely signs of that.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for doing that. I think a lot that would be helpful for a lot of people to kind of understand, why their journey is the way it is. Because I feel like being more of an evolved soul, we have harder lessons possibly, and things that we go through, more trials and tribulations than normally if we weren't more of an event soul.
Well, you're exactly right. And that goes across the board, relationships. And I wrote article number 66, relationships for more evolved people. And then, but also body care, because advanced souls have a higher, finer energy. They need to optimally take care of themselves, especially the brain. And if they don't, then they can get imbalanced, develop mental symptoms, etc. So yeah, that sort of things covered in the different articles, and that's my main audience, Laura, because I call them the 15 percenters, and that's the excuse me, approximate number of intermediate and advanced souls based on the work of Michael Newton, PhD, founder of the Life Between Lives work. So beginner souls, I don't waste too much time because they're too focused on, who's Madonna dating or who's leading the football, and all that's fine. But there's so much more to life, and the 15 percenters are focused on helping other people and making our world a better place. And that's the group that's going to affect real change.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for all the research and everything that you've done and put on your website, and then we can always go back and check. I know I'm going to go back and read those specific sessions there for you that you put. Now, how has life after death been proved scientifically that's been in your journey that came to you?
Yeah, good question. First of all, there are 3 categories of evidence for life after death, and collectively, it definitively proves that life continues after the body dies. And so those are articles number 1, which is about the scientific evidence, which I'll come back to. article number 60 covers the clinical evidence. That includes things like near-death experiences, evidential medium findings, what I just mentioned, the life between lives work, etc. And then the third category, which is the least objective but the most transformative for many people, is we term experiential evidence. That is based on firsthand experiences. So, many people have had angel encounters, glimpsed loved ones who have passed in their peripheral vision, very deep dreams where they felt they were visiting. And this is one reason Dr. Gary Schwartz and I started working together, because we both realized that a number of people had come to us and said, I'd like to share this with you because no one else in my life would get it. They think I'm going crazy. And then they share a very common experience, like I just mentioned. So he said, my gosh, we need a place where people can share these, and we need to educate people that these kinds of firsthand experiences, what are called spiritually transformative experiences, are very, very common and certainly proof. But the definitive evidence, Laura, is based on the scientific research of Dr. Gary Schwartz, PhD, former Harvard professor, tenured Yale professor, and recently retired at the University of Arizona. So Dr. Schwartz has worked, well, for over 25 years, but especially the last 15 to prove scientifically the survival of consciousness with a series of experiments, about 15 different ways to demonstrate what we call post-material persons. So this is a material world where material persons, those who have passed on, are post-material persons. And I just finished, in fact, my eyes start to cross, you know why, 3 days, probably 5 hours a day, editing his seminal paper that will go to a scientific journal, the Journal of Scientific Exploration, 56 pages long, that describes in great detail all of his research that can't be refuted by any serious scientist. In other words, if someone believes in the scientific method, follows the methodology, follows the data, there's no denying the evidence. So we're very excited about that coming on. But for your viewers, especially those who are grieving, maybe they're in the process of passing or have had loved ones, people, or pet, they can know without a doubt now that there's no doubt about it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think sometimes we get caught up in a logical mind, and we need that scientific aspect to be a part of it, because like the spiritual realms, and we can't see it, we can feel it and sense it and maybe hear it if we're intuitively open, or can see beyond the physical realm. But usually a lot of people, they want to have like scientific facts, and I love that you bring the scientific piece into the spirituality and bring that as, combination. So perfect. Thank you. Now I've heard, or I've seen on the website you were talking is something about the A team. So how does A team validate and expand our understanding of life and death and consciousness?
By the way, when I smell after your questions, it's because you're what I call a spiritual sponge. You're you're so excited about this. You really appreciate it. So it's a joy. I'm sipping green tea, and so it's like we're having a conversation. I hope viewers will feel the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, green tea too.
So the A team is our term for post-material luminaries who have been helping the SoulPhone project. So that's a big statement. Let me back up. For about the last 15 years, well, let me back up for them. In the late 1990s, Dr. Schwartz did a series of double and even triple blinded studies at the University of Arizona that effectively proved that some mediums have abilities, genuine abilities to channel through people who have passed on. he first of all, he was a pioneer. He was one of 5 people to start the field of behavioral medicine when he was at Yale. Then he was the first scientist to investigate energy healing and prove, like Reiki and healing touch, and prove that it's indeed powerful in the hands of skilled practitioners. And then he was in other fields, but then in the 1990s, he turned his attention to survival of consciousness. Is there really life after death? And he grew up an agnostic, but he was open to the possibility, especially because he had 2 near-death experiences when he was a kid. So he reasoned that perhaps one of the best ways to start proving, or one way or the other, if there's life after death, was to investigate mediums. He knew firsthand that some mediums are frauds. They use cold reading, hot reading, and so on, different tricks. He actually took a course, how to be a fake medium. It's been so much fun working with him. He's just a genius. He loves people and life so much. But then he found that some mediums indeed have verifiable abilities. So this is all described in his book, The Afterlife Experiments. And Dr. Deepak Chopra wrote the foreword for that book. And so in a nutshell, under tightly controlled conditions, there was no way the mediums knew who the subject would be. And sometimes the mediums didn't see the subject, and sometimes they didn't even hear them. And yet, these mediums had an 87% hit rate or success rate on details. You know, your mother passed, her name's Ruth, she had brown hair, versus the control group, which were non-mediums, which had a 23% success rate. They were basically guessing. So after that, well, in the process of that, he became colleagues with some of the top mediums, John Edward, George Anderson, for example, Judith Campbell. And so they kept in touch with him, and they said, Dr. Schwartz, I keep hearing from Albert Einstein. He tells me that you're supposed to build technology to enable widespread communication, high quality and quantity of communication with those who have changed worlds. Well, when he heard that 3 or 4 times independently from different mediums, he said, okay, well, something's going on here. So he started the work. And by the way, if people visit the website soulphone.org, they'll find I create a 2-hour video where I show pictures of all the different stages of research he did that prove, for example, they can have physicality, they can project a voice, they do have an image, they can move air, for example, in an airtight container. I mean, it's just been remarkable amount of research. But none of those were practical for what he wanted. His goal is to have technology as affordable and widespread, easy to use, accurate, near real time as current smart devices. And so that's what he and his team are working on right now. So this group of post-material luminaries, scientists, educators, inventors, people that many people have heard of, Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, David Bohm, B-O-H-M, who is a contemporary of Albert Einstein, genius. He's a quantum physicist who also merged Hindu spirituality with that and his understandings about the nature of reality, David Bohm. So that group and others then started giving him information through mediums. So we have 10 of the top mediums in the US who get information from the A team and then funnel it to Dr. Schwartz. And it's so funny because they'll say, he shows me all his correspondences and he'll say, okay, Gary, I don't even know if these are real words, but I'm told that you need to enhance the capacitance and inhibit the whatever, and they're like, are these really words? And they'll say, yes, and it's exactly what I'm working on right now. It's exactly what the kind of feedback I need to hear. So it's been a magical journey. So there are we can only work with so many of them.
Hmm.
So we mainly work with a group of 30, but we are told for every one of them, there are thousands more waiting in the wings in every field of study who were geniuses, pioneers while on Earth, and who have continued their work. For example, Tesla said, we asked him about free energy. So you think you could help us finally, develop free energy, pollution free, and so on? And he said, if you think what I did while I was on Earth was amazing, wait till you see what I've been working on here. So it's super exciting, and that's one of the reasons we want to develop this post-material communication technology, so that first we can text and type with them, then talk with them, and then video conference like we're doing now, because they stand ready to give webinars. I mean, how would you like to have Jesus and Buddha, for example, share what they really taught versus what the power hierarchy has changed over the years? Same way with Albert Schweitzer and others on healing, and Benjamin Franklin, Abraham Lincoln, and others on real leadership. And so we're working hard toward it. We most of the time, our communications are based on the technology, the research and development. But once in a while, we take time and ask some questions. And so I asked, well, when we get technology to convey, even if it's through texting and typing, would you all be willing to give webinars? And the medium who was bringing them through at that point said, she started laughing and she said, they're pushing each other out of the way to get first in line. So that's
That's
how much they love human. I mean, they're still humans, very much so. How much they love people on Earth and want to help our world become what it can be. We're actually so close.
hmm. Yeah, yeah, that would be amazing if we could do that. Um, and I've had some experience with through my journey of doing channel OI channel, more so than doing mediumship. But I have done readings, and mediumship has played a role in it. So I've had that experience. So I relate to that. Do you see these technologies actually being in the home, or how does that play out? Do you have any like inspired thoughts or knowledge on that?
Yeah, great question. In the beginning, it's quite likely that these sessions will be that sessions where we will have, because security is an issue, uh,
Hmm.
you know, any technology can be misused, and we don't want this to be. You see what happened to nuclear technology, for example. And so Dr. Schwartz takes his role as the birther of all this. He's the one opening Pandora's box very seriously. So in the beginning, it will be very highly secure, unknown location centers where people then can get on their Zoom like we're doing now and be in touch with the center then and see the yes, no answers or the typed in or whatever the stage of technology is at that point. But eventually, our goal is to develop, again, near real time, highly accurate, reliable, and safe and secure technology through take home devices, personal devices, or apps, like we use for many uses now.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely very futuristic. If we could have those, handy at any time, speaking to people on the other side. So definitely. Do you think it would just be easier? And I know it's a great thing that you guys are working on. Do you think it would just be easier because we do have those natural abilities to communicate with the other side, but a lot of people shut them off because of our beliefs and everything. Do you think it would just be easier to teach people telepathy, mediumship, and help them to awaken their abilities?
Well, I think both are important. But as I say, we work with some of the top mediums on the planet. And Dr. Schwartz has done double-blind scientific evaluations of their abilities, and he finds that even the best are about 70 to 80% accurate, which means 20 to 30% of the time they're wrong. And so that's not a very good way to communicate. Imagine if 30% of what I'm telling you is a lie. Well, how would you know what to trust and so on? So um, having so the scientific, reliable, highly accurate approach is very much needed, especially when we're getting information from scientists. Again, if we can only trust 70% of what's conveyed, it's almost as useless as 0%.
Mm-hmm.
However, having said that, I agree it's very important to help people develop relationships with their loved ones, because loved ones are not a zillion million miles away. In other words, it's all here right now. It's just that our loved ones who have changed worlds, people and pets, are vibrating at a higher, faster frequency, which most people can't perceive with their five senses. And so in my article number 28, I talk about afterlife contacts, which is my preferred term for what many call after-death communications. But I'm trying to use as conscious and accurate language as possible. So number 28 talks about the commonality of people having waking and dream contacts with their loved ones, some of which have what are called evidentiary or validation components. In other words, the person on Earth received information that they didn't know and was later verified as accurate, which tells us it was more than just their imagination or wishful thinking. And then in article number 9, I talk about a technique I developed under deep relaxation guided imagery called the afterlife contact technique, um, that allows people to have very profound visits with their loved ones. I've done this with thousands of people now, and about 75% of the people report a meaningful experience the first time they do it, and even more so as they get used to it. So again, that's all described in article number 9. And then under shop, and we're talking about soulproof.com, is the free audio program called Afterlife Contact. Um, and this has been very transformative. I work a lot with a group called Helping Parents Heal. We have 35,000 members around the world, with one or more people with one or more children who have passed on. And when I do this, for example, at our conferences, we pull over 1,100 people and we have to turn people away. Almost everyone has a profound experience where they see, hear, feel, or know the living presence of their children. I mean, stroking their cheeks, rubbing their hair, hugging them, sitting on their lap, long communications, telepathic communications. So the approaches are actually out there now. And yes, as you say, it would be very helpful for more people to realize that our loved ones are very near. They want to continue a relationship, and it's not that difficult as people might think to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's important that we do keep our intuitive abilities awake, awake and open. Do you think the technology would limit people from doing that if they're just relying on that?
Well, first of all, we have a long way to go to have, well, I shouldn't say that. Right now, Dr. Schwartz is working with a team of electrical engineers, software specialists, optical physicists, evidential mediums, as well as A team members. So every time we think we've hit the breakthrough, then something comes up. It's a real trick to achieve this clear communication. I mean, if it were easy, someone else would have done it by now. But it probably will be a while, let's say a few years before the technology is available. But even after that, there's nothing like that personal experience. Let me back up a little. It's a scientific fact that the human brain and senses, as amazing as they are, detect much less than 1% of reality. So the brain thinks it knows everything, but actually it knows very little about the big picture of life, including that our loved ones could be right beside us. And so I think even with technology available, it would be very advantageous to expand our senses. And that's what you referred to, develop our intuition. Our mediums are trained to expand their five senses even a little bit. And then you start glimpsing more of reality than you do. So I say most people are looking at life through a tiny pinhole and wondering why things seem so cruel, senseless, like there's no God or an uncaring God. So if we can expand that just a little bit, say a silver dollar size, we can see more of life and understand how Creator operates.
Mhm.
Evan Alexander, MD, who had a profound near-death experience, and I discussed this over dinner, and we agreed he is a academic neurosurgeon and me as a doctor of chiropractic with a vast knowledge of the central nervous system, that about 90% of what the brain does is filter input, because if we could see, hear, feel everything that exists in our world, we couldn't function. And that's one explanation for schizophrenics. Their control valve opens too quickly before they're prepared. In India, those people are called God intoxicants, and they're cared for and revered because they realize these people saw too much of God, too much of the big picture of life too soon. Well, in the West, we put them on antipsychotics. So um,
Mm,
there's a lot involved here, but that kind of covers that topic.
yeah. Um, yep. And so like I kind of can understand that. Like I had a near death experience, so I have a little bit more understanding. I've had multiple life reviews, and then of course opening my intuitive abilities along with the full Kundalini. So I've been on quite a journey and have done a lot, and I do channeling. So kind of like the keyboard. I channel through and I do typing, and I can get really typing really fast with the information that's coming in and to translate it. So,
Hmm.
and then putting it out into books and things like that. So it's really interesting, the journey, but I can understand it's like hard to fit back in. I didn't feel like I fit in when I first came in the first place, but now I can really not fit in. It's hard to find myself doing everyday human things. It doesn't bring me joy, like I would have before,
Sure.
before all my spiritual awakenings happen. So
Yeah, just
definitely.
just so I understand where you're coming from, how long ago was your NDE and your Kundalini awakening?
Uh, NDE was 2010, and I started on the journey of the meditation and then the yoga, and then my abilities started opening up and more expanded. And then I was doing astral travels in my meditations, and it just kind of evolved from there. And then at some point, I think it was like 4 years later, that I had a full Kundalini, and it took me 6 months to recover from that. So I was very, yeah, it's really interesting, the whole journey that I've been on.
It is. Well, as you know, many people who come back from near-death experience feel depression because they miss home.
Hmm.
They didn't want to come back to Earth, but they're told it's their time. And so my message to all people is you don't have to wait until you die to experience heaven. In other words, we are in heaven right now. We are in eternity. Joseph Campbell taught that in the Gospel of Thomas, which was removed from the current Bible, were statements like the kingdom of heaven is here now, but most men do not realize it. So that's the big message, of course, in many religious teachings is, um, open your eyes, come to your senses. You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So it's possible, as each one of us then get that a little more, then let our light shine, help others. That's when the world would come together. And if I may, I'd like to take a moment to share a program I put together called Greater Reality Healing, Living, and Helping. So this is described in article number 131 at soulproof.com. And also there's a top tab that says Greater Reality Program. So I've created an article and videos for each one of those categories. So some people need to focus on healing, loved ones past. My God, I work with so many people. One woman said last year she came home and there had been a carbon monoxide leak,
Mm.
and her husband, her son, and their two dogs all passed. And she said, I have a question. I thought, oh boy, what's she going to say? Like, God, how could God allow this? Or you think suicide's okay? And she said, how can I help other people who have gone through grief? And I was like, oh my gosh, bravo to be at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, anyway, this program, we have meetings twice a month, everything's free. And so I want people to know about this, the Greater Reality program, because that's what then one person at a time can help people get their lives together, optimally heal, live, and help. And then that's when eventually we'll reach that tipping point and our world will become like that.
Mm. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And I think understanding, who we are, the truth about everything, opening your consciousness, can help us to live better lives, because I don't see this, although I know what it's like to be on the other side and the love and everything that's there. Sometimes I do get into spaces where I'm like, oh God, why did I come back? But I come back to help and to share and to bring, wisdom and to explore and still to continue my journey learning. And that when I came back, they told me spiritual amnesia is going to set back in. I'm not going to remember every single detail, but as I write and channel, everything will start coming back as I do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's important. And I know you talked about the spiritual amnesia, and I think sometimes it's hard for us to remember and to expand, from that little coin, if we have that in place, and it's very limiting.
Yeah, spiritual amnesia has its purpose,
Mm-hmm.
but we can control it so it's the right amount for us. So there's a beautiful, in the Jewish tradition, a story that before a soul comes to earth, the angel of forgetfulness touches them on the upper lip so that they don't remember the whole big picture of life. And that's why there's this little indentation there,
Hmm.
because this is a school, Earth School. And if we remembered everything, then we wouldn't be able to have our lessons. In other words, you can tell somebody you're part of God and interconnected with all of life. So if you hear it, that's like an intellectual, superficial knowing. But when you come to Earth and forget the big picture, and then you struggle and search, and then you realize, oh my gosh, I'm one with all and connected with everyone, then you really that's an internalized, deep knowing that becomes part of your energy, then part of your eternal consciousness. So that's why it's useful to forget to a degree. Um, However, once a person is ready, then they can remember more and more incrementally. And then that lightens this journey and allows us to share our light to realize there's truly nothing to fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's part of with what I'm doing is helping to share that, not to fear death and not to fear anything, and just to remember who we truly are and why we're here, and to work on everything that we're doing, you know, and it's just awakening. I did like the comment that you said about the sunsets. It reminds you of God. I lived on the beach. It was so amazing. I lived on the beach for 5 years, and every night went to go see the sunset. And you could see just everybody lining up to see the sunset. And it was like everything was just still and everybody was just looking at it. So I think there's something there to be said about that. statement, and it reminds me of the movie, like The City of the Angels, I think it was called, where everybody was just going, like the angels were just going to look at the sun. It was really amazing. And I was like, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think it does remind us of our true nature, light, and also
Mhm.
of our source, which is light. And Hindu rishis, wise people, knew this several thousand years BC, and it probably goes back before that. They used deep meditation. They're the ones that came up with the sound and the mantra Om, because
Mhm.
that's the sound they heard, the primordial sound of all that is, the great I am. And so that's why people like Dr. Bohm, when he, as a quantum physicist, came up with his understandings, he says that basically what's really going on, in other words, to our limited brain and senses, it looks like we're solid and separate and we can die. We're separate from each other and we're separate from source, when in fact none of that is true. And Bowden said really what's going on is a dance of energy, an energy soup or a sea, and periodically there'll be ripples of excitation on the surface. And depending on who's observing, that can look like a solid earthly incarnation experience. And the Buddha shared similar things. He was asked, well, what's a human incarnation about? And he said, well, one of the best ways to understand it is go down to the beach, go down the ocean where waves are hitting big rocks. He said, so we're all part of the divine ocean. We're each like a drop of water in the ocean. Or as Rumi said, we're not drops of water, we are the entire ocean. But so a wave will crash on the rock, and for just a moment, a drop of water is suspended in the air. You probably see it crash
Mhm.
as they go up and then drop back down. He said during that time, the drop thinks, oh my God, I'm so alone. I'm dying. Why, what happened to God? Why did God forsake all this drama we put ourselves through meaninglessly? It's really humorous when you realize. And then the drop of water goes back in the ocean, says, oh, now I remember. So that's
Mhm.
when I've searched for truth over the last 53 years after seeing people and children pass, I look for commonality in different fields. So when I see ancient religious understandings, Hindu and Buddhist, for example, and then quantum physics, scientific understandings, I figure we're barking up the right tree.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Now I do life review as part of the pre-death planning. I've had a lot of training in it it's my own life, and I do that to help them to resolve any unresolved issues, things like that, and to kind of clear the way for their passing, because I understand that the beliefs can hold us up, and maybe we can have like a hellish experience in our transition to the other side if we're holding on to certain beliefs, things that we've been through in life and we haven't dealt with them. So how do you see, or have you gone into any research suggestion about the life review and how it can help us to live a better life now?
Sure. Uh, yeah, you should bet anything you ask, I've searched into. So I talk about the life review in article number 45 at soulproof.com. And I actually created what's called the life review technique. It's one of the audio programs, again, free. I did this after working with Dr. Ken Ring, PhD, University of Connecticut, Professor Emeritus. Dr. Ring was helped found the International Association of Near-Death Studies, IANS, and was one of the early pioneers in researching and interviewing near-death experiencers. And so he found in his studies that you don't have to nearly die to have a life review. You can have just as profound experience by having deep relaxation slash hypnosis and guided imagery then to imagine what if you were to pass on today? What would your life review be like? What areas can you see where you did really well and what areas did you not do so well? But the nice thing is that, like people have near-death experiences, they come back to Earth, it's not too late to tune yours up before you really do pass on. So you can make amends, improve, etc. And it actually changes the energetic template. So it's
Mhm.
as if you actually took the higher choice instead of maybe a lower one when you were young. And interestingly, the Aramaic language, which is the commonly used language at the time of birthing of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, the words for heaven and hell meant how you feel when you pass on and you go through a passageway and you go through a sorting out process. And you not only see but feel all the good you did and then all the bad you did. So again, those are that's the kind of thing that makes me think we're understanding more about the nature of reality when millennia old Aramaic understandings about heaven and hell, and now the near death research on life reviews say the same kind of thing. We each have a life review after we pass on, and we see here, feel what we did. It's not punitive in any way, it's all about educational and loving so that we learn the importance of the golden rule. So, very, very powerful. Finally, I'd say about that is that each of us can do a mini life review. You can do it in 2 minutes. So when I lay down to go to sleep and say my prayers and say, see you tomorrow to my team, angels, guides, master teachers, and the like, I just do a quick review. Okay, how'd I do today? Oh, yeah, that was good. That was good. Oh, I could have been nicer in that situation or more patient. And then you set the intention to do better the next time, and it helps fine tune your life so that is how you are in the future.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And I think from my own journey and what I've been shown and working on for myself through that 10 years is part of like when I was 18, I started the whole training of life review in life. And then I had the life review and my near-death experience. And then I came back and had a out-of-body life review with a guide that took me on that. But from my learning, it's we are where we are because of a past situation. And if we go back and we deal with that, it changes the vibration energy that resonates and it can change our path. And so I've actually seen that in my life. So there's, to me, that's one specific reason, to do a life review now, because it can change our trajectory of where we're going in life. Because that situation set that point that puts you on that path, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And I don't know if your viewers have seen The Map of Consciousness by David Hawkins, MD, PhD, who wrote the book Force versus Power. But Dr. Hawkins quantified the different energies. So again, we're beings of energy in an energetic universe. And things are more heavenly when we're on higher energies, which include things like peace, joy, love, gratitude, compassion. On the other hand, life seems more hellish. Not that there is a fiery eternal hell, there isn't, and not that the person is in hell, but it's a self-induced temporary state if they're
Mhm.
stuck in guilt, anger, hopelessness, etc. So again, David Hawkins' map of consciousness, very important to understand. And as you say, it's when we choose the higher energy ways of being, ways of thinking, speaking, and it is a choice, then that's when we experience a more heavenly life. Then that becomes who we are, which serves us and serves everyone around us. I interviewed 130 what we call shining light parents. So these are parents and helping parents heal who serve as group leaders and or what we call caring listeners. And those interviews are available at helpingparentsheal.org slash, I think it's YouTube videos. And so those are all free. You can watch my interviews with them. Um, but then we took the excerpts from the best of and created a book called Shining Light Parents Speak. And they're just amazing teachings to me. People, some of whom had 2, 3, the top was 5 children pass on. So you want to talk about wisdom, how to sense your loved ones better, how to get through the dark night of the soul, and so on. So that book is free under soulproof.com/shop.
Perfect. I'll definitely check that out. I like the topic, helping parents heal. And that kind of brings up something else too, with the coming into life. And a lot of people want to prove the afterlife, but no, a lot of people don't focus on the before life because we're not really the loved one after that is coming in. We become the loved one after once we come into life, right? Because who are we before that's the life that we're taking as a soul, right? So I've had
Hold on. I have to say you lost me on that. Could you say what you just said a little more slowly, please?
Yeah, so we have once we're in life, right? We are the body and then the spirit comes in. And a lot of us we focus on the afterlife and how we are the loved one after, right? But who are we before we actually get here? So a lot of people don't focus on proof of that, not only the afterlife, but I have proof of the coming in, which kind of brings in
I
the
got you.
topic of the angel as well. So I was counseling at eating disorder facility as a mental health tech, and doing an internship to become a psychologist. And so I was sitting there and I got this energy of like a baby spirit. And I was like, why am I feeling like there's a baby spirit here? And I felt like this whoosh go across me, like the wind. And I was like, is the door open or the window or the AC on? And nothing was open. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? This is when my abilities were starting to wake up. And I was like, okay, I feel like there's a baby. And then I smelled baby powder. And I was like, okay, something's going on. Everybody was here eating a snack, and all the intakes were done for the day. And I was like, I better go take a look at the nurse's office and see what's going on. And so after everybody left the eating area, and I went into the nurse's office, did we have a late intake? And she was like, yes. And she's pregnant. And she came in because she was actually not with the eating disorder, but with the addiction population of alcohol, drugs. And she said she came in because she was going for an abortion because she didn't want to have another child because she had addictions. And she saw an angel that told her, no, you have to go get clean. This baby needs to be born,
Wow.
right? So the spirit can come in because that baby had a purpose and it needed to be here. And so she came to get clean. So that's really an interesting experience for me. But, I see that a lot of people, and that can help with, parents knowing that, there is a purpose for everything, even the baby that comes in, the baby spirits. Have you had any experience or research on the before life?
Oh, of course. And first of all, that's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing. I got goosebumps. Yeah, I trained with Dr. Brian Weiss in 1998 to do past life regressions. And so the article on that, reincarnation is one way to term it, is article number 34. And then there's a free audio program called Past Life Regression where people can experience, did they have other space, time, dimension experiences that would inform this one? So, we're talking about the afterlife, before, or what Dr. Newton calls life between lives. So, yeah, I think the primary focus is on the here and now, but it's very helpful to know that there's life after death, and also informative to know that this probably isn't our first time around the block. And so combining that, I think, helps us have the best successful life in every aspect of our life. So let's talk a moment about that. The term I use instead of reincarnation is cyclical life experiences, because past life regression implies that life is more a logical, sequential order. Like you hear people say, Yeah, I was a pioneer in the 1800s and a Viking in the 1600s. I'm like, is it really that, cut and dried? And so my model is, and Dr. Schwartz shares this, that really what's happening is that we're eternal beings, okay, beings of energy, consciousness. And so what do we do for eternity? Just sing Hosanna to the highest and play golden harps. That gets pretty old. Well, what we like to have are adventures, and you listed the list before. You come here to learn, grow, serve others, have adventures, explore. And so one way to do that is have what are very much like virtual reality experiences
Mhm.
where it seems so real, and in a way that's what we're having right now. It seems real and it's supposed to, so you can have the full experience. But really, it's just a thought. It's kind of like people in heaven, home with a capital H, watching a movie or reading a book. And that's really about how relatively real that is. So instead of that happening in a logical sequential order, it's like the concept of Akashic records, and there's some evidence for that, that we can just go to this library that contains everything and pull out a book and read the book, and that's what seems to be going on at the time. So that's my best advice for how people handle what seemed to be before we came to Earth.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and everything's recorded, the Akashic records. So I think that we can always just tap in, if we have that awareness to do that, and opening our abilities for that. Uh, so that kind of brings me to like the afterlife, what you're just talking about, like the afterlife communications. So and the reincarnation, like how do we bring that together? Because if we have the pre-life, our agreements or whatever that we're coming into life, and then we have our life and we get to know people as our loved ones because of the family dynamics in this one experience, and then we transition, we term them as our loved ones. But if we're having reincarnation, or we're going into other lifetimes and having different lives, so are they really there in the communication
Yeah.
as that loved one, or are we just a spirit? You know what I'm trying to say?
I sure do. I've heard the question many times. And by the way, your audience is very fortunate because you are so bright. You have such an inquisitive mind, such a passion for this.
Thank you.
I really am impressed. Good job. So, yeah, here's my understandings of that. First of all, Dr. Weiss, again, it's Brian Weiss, MD, a pioneer in the field of past life regressions, said that on average, souls will reincarnate every 100 to 200 Earth years, keeping in mind that Earth time and call it spirit time are different. However, it's been validated that some souls, especially those with an agenda to fulfill, sometimes some of these parents will experience their kids' souls come back very quickly in another child or a child of their children, so as a grandchild. So they can come back very quickly. So there's a few scenarios in that. So one question from it is, all right, let's say I passed on today, and so I go to the afterlife and I have a reunion, I see my loved ones. Well, what if my grandma, for example, has reincarnated and she's back on Earth? Well, first of all, energy consciousness, who we really are, is non-local, meaning it's not impaired by time and space. So part of grandma's energy, her soul, could manifest for me and appear as grandma, even though part of who she is back on Earth. Which brings up another point. It's not all or nothing in terms of how our energy manifests. Um, the first time I heard this approach came from actually Native American teachings. I'm blessed to have three friends who are Native American teachers. And this one showed me a picture of a brave in profile with above his head a bear, and then an eagle, and then pine trees, and then the moon and stars. And he said, "Look at this, Mark. What does this say to you?" And I said that, first of all, that each one of us is interconnected with all that is. But secondly, the energy, that which we are, extends beyond this human body. And we can experience life in these other vantage points, an animal, a bird, or nature. He said, yeah, that's a long teaching of Native Americans. And then I found that that was in different cultures across time. But it certainly surfaces in the Life Between Lives research data. And they have now 60,000 different clients in 35 different countries, and each sharing independently what it's like before we come to Earth. So the understanding after looking at all that data is that on average, a soul only needs to use about 40% of the totality of their energy to have an earthly experience. So the rest of that energy could be in another space-time dimension, and some never leaves home base. So that helps explain, for example, grandma could be back on Earth as a baby, but part of her energy is still back home, and that's how she can be there for me to comfort me and enjoy a reunion. So you can't, the topic is multi-location, other words to put are simultaneous realities or parallel experiences, and that's described in article number 75.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's important to understand because I know a lot of people ask, am I going to be with my loved one again, and like forever, without understanding that, we give up this life, and transition, and we do have multiple other lives, and we're not always going to be that person that we know in this life. We're going to be still the spirit, the soul, that's continuing on, but not always, per se. It's almost like they think that what they have here, they're going to be married, they're going to have this person as this child, and it's always going to be that way for like eternity. And I think that comes with religious beliefs.
Well, here's my understanding of it. It's a choice. So, for
Mhm.
example, my mom passed 2 years ago, 2.5, and I said, "So, Mom, what do you?" Well, let me start with this. The afterlife isn't the same for everyone. It's not one size fits all. And basically, the afterlife reflects our degree of consciousness, time of passing, our existing beliefs at the time of passing, and then what we most want or need afterwards. So, for example, people who believe that there's nothingness after you die, that may be what they experience afterwards. Like, okay, they pass on, they're like, there's nothing after death. There's nothing after death. Wait a minute, what's that light over there? And then they start exploring. Or there are some people who believe, for example, that only those in their religion or denomination go to heaven, everybody else goes to hell. So they'll be like, yeah, here we are, just us, the true believers. God's chosen, just us, hallelujah. And then they'll be like, well, who are those people over there? So it's a matter of understanding. So at first, our pre-existing beliefs color our perceptions, but then after a while we start, same thing, we start seeing more of that. So my mom, she said, well, when I pass on, I want things to be like it was when you kids were little, because that was her happiest time in life. She suffered from depression her whole life. Which, by the way, quick sidetrack, when she was 12, she was a normal kid. Captain of the debate team, captain of the cheerleaders, top student, happy, outgoing. She had athlete's foot, and the doctors at the time recommended that she soak her feet in formaldehyde.
Mm.
Oh my God, can you imagine? And so that affected her brain. She said ever after that, she was depressed, low confidence, anxious, and it was never fully treated. It couldn't be treated because the damage was done. So, boy, talk about argument for there being more than one life. If that was our one life, she sure got short end of the straw. Anyway, so she said, yeah, I want to be a housewife. I want you three kids to be little and need me. I want to live in our house in Woodward. And I said, Mom, then that is what you will experience. And it will be for a while, not for eternity. Who knows how long before she's ready then, before she's healed, before she's rehabbed. She's like, okay, I can let that go. Now I'm ready to explore other parts of the vastness of life.
Mhm. I love that explanation. Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
that. Because I feel like a lot of people may misunderstand that. And I've had where I've asked to be shown multiple lives because I was questioning like what that if that really existed. And so I was taken to another life in it, and it made sense because in this life I couldn't understand why I was upset that I had a boy. I so wanted a girl, and I didn't get the girl. Um, but it would have inhibited me. There's a couple of reasons. It would have inhibited me from going on the journey that I'm on now in the awakening because I wouldn't be able to do that with a girl. The boy supported that journey, so I didn't have that attachment of the girl. And they showed me the other life, another life that I'm having now with a girl, a daughter. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like these simultaneous lives that are going on. And I'm like, oh my God. And I was like, I have a daughter. And this joy just came up within me. And it was like, okay, so that makes sense now. So they showed me that we do have multiple lives going on at the same time.
Yeah, there in that article I mentioned, number 25, multi-location, there are, for example, quantum mathematicians who hypothesize that every time we reach a fork in the road, or like you know, I'd like to have a boy, but I'd like to have a daughter, we can experience all those. And that's part of the evidence behind the concept of multiverses, and
Mm-hmm.
that perhaps we can be involved in thousands, or they say even millions, which my brain can't comprehend, different slices of life. So life is so vast, so exciting, um, and that's first of all what that story. You have some really good stories. Are you assembling those, by the way, in a book?
I haven't officially wrote everything down, but I tend to at some point put everything in a book of my whole journey.
Yeah, you've told several that really touched me. But talking about that, you do have a girl and do have a son and daughter. That's kind of what part of what I share with these parents whose kids have passed. I said, I know it's horrible, it sucks, it seems cruel and tragic and senseless. However, at the same time, part of who you are is with your child right now, and you two are looking down on you in this moment, cheering you on, rooting you on. Hopefully, you can see through the darkness and remember
Mhm.
why you planned this and fulfill those missions. So, it's very important to understand that we are multidimensional beings, and that helps us be in the here and now even better, more clearly, more empowered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. And I think that knowing the truth helps us to live a better and more fulfilling life. And so it takes away the fear of the afterlife. It takes away, the not knowing, the not understanding, and being more present in life if we can understand it all, which is part of the reason what I'm doing and helping people. And of course, you as well, I'm sure. And so kind of bringing this into a close, I want to kind of wrap it up, with a couple questions about death. So how can understanding our eternal nature, like we were just talking about, shift how we approach death and even living?
Well, first of all, the when we know that no one really dies, just this Earth suit does. And here's how relatively unimportant the Earth suit is. I say to people, do you remember a sweater you wore in fourth grade. Most people say, no, how I remember that. I said, well, that's kind of like what your body is now. What you see in the mirror, it's as inconsequential as that. So when people get that, then they realize that death is just another phase of life, kind of like childhood and puberty, although I think dying is definitely easier in puberty. And so people realize that death is nothing to fear. It's not an end. It's not a bad thing. We have it so wrong. Many cultures celebrate death. They throw a party and so on because they know it's just the flip side of being born onto Earth. But in Western cultures, dress up in black and cry. I mentioned my documentary film called Soul Proof, again, free under shop. And one of our people we interviewed was a spiritualist minister. And he said, it's funny, I'll go to funerals and everybody's gathered around the coffin and crying and talking how they're going to miss the person that passed. He said, I'm over there talking to the guy. So we actually can joke. My handyman was at the house yesterday, and he told me he's going to a funeral of a friend. And I said, well, Paul, you're not getting any younger. I said, maybe you want to pass out some flyers while you're there and say, hey, when I die, I hope y'all will come to my funeral. I'd like to see a good turnout. And we were laughing, and I said, this is part of the new world to come is, as we know, no one really dies. We can joke about it. There's so much not to fear. And so we can do that in a conscious way. And I know I have an article about that, but I can't think what the title is. And so, yeah, we can prepare for it just like we prepare for a big trip and check off the boxes, but without fear, with joy, with expectation. I mentioned Dr. Ken Ring. He said that based on his work with many people who have had near-death experiences, here's his understanding of what it feels like when you pass. He said, recall your 100 best days on earth, your happiest, healthiest, most energetic. Now multiply that by 1,000,000. And you get a sense of how good it feels when you re-enter the light. Actually, we never leave it, but when you remember that you're one with the light and you drop this especially old and aged, ill body. And so, gosh, what's there to fear about that? Brian Weiss, I mentioned before, he said, from everything he knows, Earth is like the toilet bowl of the universe. And so he said, people hold on to this earthly experience so tightly, but this is one of the most difficult places to be. He said, if there's anything like hell in the universe, it's Earth. And so when people know that, then they can let go more lightly. They can do everything they do while they're here, live impeccably, fulfill their missions, love with all their heart. But then when it's time to move on, like, okay, what's the next adventure?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you were saying that, it was like when just pack it all up. I was imagining, just boxes, of this life, and because we don't need to take it with us, we just take our lessons with us. So yeah. And then, do you have any last words or anything else that you would like to share with the audience that we didn't cover that you feel is important today?
We covered so much. Actually, I think the average person is going to be reeling right now. And so I feel called to say, if this is overwhelming to you, if you didn't follow some of that, don't worry about it because Laura's obviously a heavyweight. And, I've been dealing with this for a long time. So I would say just take it one bite at, kind of the way you eat an elephant. That's a horrible metaphor, one bite at a time. Um, and just if some of this seems like crazy talk to you, then don't focus on that. Focus on what makes sense because it is a journey and it is a best and incremental process. We didn't get to this level of understanding all these things overnight. And so you don't have to either. But I would just say, Yeah, visit soulproof.com. 136 articles covering the biggest questions and challenges. 25 radio shows. I've hosted 2 different radio shows, so interviews with people like Wayne Dyer and different ones I mentioned, Brian Weiss, Raymond Moody, Dr. Schwartz, Anita Morjani, whose ND was so profound her terminal cancer disappeared afterwards. Carolyn Mace, an expert on soul contracts. So much just wonderful information there, plus the books, the audio programs, the documentary, and information about the Greater Reality program, and then soulphone.org about the SoulPhone project, videos, articles, to understand more about this technology that already is revolutionizing the way we live because it's proven life after death, but also in the future. Dr. Schwartz no longer says that if we complete this technology, he says it's a matter of when. And so just start making a list. Who do you want to talk with? And what questions do you have to ask at these webinars by these post-material luminaries? So Helen Keller, who is blind and deaf, said, life is either a daring adventure or it's nothing at all. And so life is a daring adventure. We're souls who volunteered to come here for good reasons. And so the more you can remember all that, the more you can relax, enjoy, do what you came here to do, enjoy your loved ones, enjoy each moment. I mean, that's why, for example, this art, this nature and artwork around me, life is so full of beauty, and we each are integral parts of that.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Well, thank you for what you're doing, Laura.
You as well. I appreciate it, and all the research that you're doing and helping others as well.
It's been a pleasure. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. I will, and you as well. I look forward to the technology coming in. Hopefully, I'm here to have that experience. So that'd be awesome.
Well, if not, you can operate on the other side.
Yeah, I'll come in from the other side.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about you and me. We're not the one and only. It's going to happen to everybody. Yeah, baby. Say it isn't so, baby. It's the truth, don't you know, baby? We're all consciousness, living out our reason in a world of endless stories. Said from the beginning, we race to the finish as we face the harsh reality. We don't remember where we come from or where we're going. But don't you worry, baby. We are all worthy of the one true story. It isn't in the distant past, it's the future that